Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk Business South Carolina. I'm your host, Rick Jenkins. It's good to have you. As I mentioned in the opening, it wasn't too long ago that many of us didn't even know what the words supply chain really meant. It wasn't part of our lexicon. It wasn't a conversation that we had. It just something we did not discuss. It existed in the background, but we really didn't know what it was about. And then something called COVID hit in March of 2020. And then that all changed. And if you ever went to the grocery store or Costco or Sam's and you were looking and trying to find that product that you never have a problem finding, but all of a sudden it wasn't there, you started hearing about supply chain. Supply chain challenges have become a lot bigger, and the impact is a lot more than just the shortage of toilet paper that existed in March of 2020. And that's what we're going to talk about today with this guy. Companies now are having to make a lot of investment in their supply chain to ensure that all this craziness doesn't happen again in the future sometimes when something gets thrown at us. And a lot of times it all comes down to technology and using technology to fix a modern problem. And that's what we're doing today with supply chain. And so this guy, Joe Perkins, is the Executive Vice President of Operations at Carolina Handling. Joe's going to talk to us about all kinds of tech that is used today, including artificial intelligence. There's another thing that we never stop hearing about these days, AI. Joe, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, Rick.
It is good to have you here. You joined me not too long ago, and we had a nice conversation, and I'm looking forward to this again. So I appreciate you being here.
Absolutely.
You're in Greenville?
We are. So
Okay.
Greenville, Charlotte,
Yep.
Atlanta, Alabama.
Right,
all over the
but
place.
your office, you sit in Greenville.
No, I actually reside in Charlotte.
There you go. Okay, so you came down. Our studio, of course, is in Greenville. You came down from Charlotte today?
Yeah, I did. In Greenville quite a bit. Great city.
It is a great city. Carolina Handling, you all are a supply chain consultant, and that's what we're going to be discussing today, but you do a lot of other things as well. And so just briefly, kind of give us that rundown, a little elevator speech of what you guys do.
Certainly. So obviously into service, new equipment sales, automation, things like that, rentals. But I think, the last couple of years and even since COVID, we've really taken on this identity as an integrator to where we can pull together all the different pieces of what we do and our customers' needs to be able to create that ecosystem around their supply chain so that they are fully functioning and as efficient as possible.
Right. We talked about COVID from the outset and how that has made such a dramatic change on so many things, of course, including supply chain, maybe more than anything, right? Tell us, what did we learn as a society from a supply chain perspective about when COVID hit?
Sure. So I think there were a couple things, right? The dependency on labor at that point in time. And we saw this exodus of a big portion of the workforce. I mean, a lot of the baby boomers were retiring or set to retire right there around the time of COVID. And they created this gap in the workforce that, quite frankly, we haven't filled yet. I don't know if we're going to be able to fill it. The stats kind of say it's improbable. Right now, there's a job opening for every half person, right? So not even enough people to fill the roles. I think the other things that we learned were the dependency related to the supply chain, right? So whether it was suppliers of, the retailers and things like that, but there were a lot of single source supply situations where when that source wasn't able to provide, we saw retailers or manufacturers that halted production. So that was another big area that we saw.
Yeah, I mean, you've got two varying degrees of supply chain issues, right? We make fun of the toilet paper crisis, but make no mistake, it was a crisis. But it's way over here on the scale. But then you've got, as you just alluded to, you've got somebody, and I'm using this just because it's an OEM here in South Carolina. You got somebody like BMW who might have had to have slowed down production because they couldn't get, bolts to attach this part to that part.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it. And, COVID impacted different parts of the world in different ways. And so there were overseas suppliers that were shut down much longer than what we were here in the U.S. And so, again, to your point, I mean, BMW, depending on someone in another country, maybe they weren't open for business yet.
Artificial intelligence. Let's go there for a second. The whole point, or one of the points of our conversation today is how we are improving supply chain efficiencies through the help of technology and artificial intelligence. Anytime these days that we're talking about technology, AI, regardless of the industry we're discussing, it could be the media industry, it could be manufacturing, it could be supply chain. AI is always in that conversation. So, how is AI helping the supply chain world?
The first thing that comes to mind is, chatbots, right? I mean,
Yes.
every single time you get online to do something, chatbots are there. And when you look at the consumer and their interaction, I mean, it used to be with a human. So I think the supply chain experience starts from the point of purchase. And so we're seeing that interaction that is happening. But many retailers are now using AI even to give you visibility as to the products that you may be purchasing from them and what that would look like in your space. So whether that's driving sales or whether that's helping prevent returns in the supply chain, that's another area. We're also
Hang
seeing.
on a sec, Joe. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but I want to make sure I understood what you just said. Tell me that again in a different way.
So I know my wife does it a lot, right? She'll go on Amazon and she's looking for a table and she can literally film the room and say, hey, what would this table look like in that
Got
room?
it.
And so
Got
then all of a sudden it's like, no, I don't like the look of that table with this paint scheme. And so
Right.
it prevented her from purchasing, which means they don't have to ship it. We don't have to return it. Again, kind of aids the supply chain
Got
a
it.
little bit
Yeah,
there.
makes sense.
But as far as what we're seeing on our side with our customers, a lot of AI in the routing optimization. So we're moving products. How do we most efficiently and effectively move product, whether that's fuel consumption reduction or whether it's reducing labor or if it's getting products there faster? We know there's a lot of it. At a plant level, we're seeing a lot of scanning and technology in the plants that actually is watching production, managing production, and there's even areas where it's so sophisticated that it can look at the plant production and move the order of raw materials up or back so that inventory becomes much more just in time. We know that, we're not landlocked here in the Southeast, but in many areas, the footprint of their building can't be expanded. So they really can't carry much more. And then I think the last piece is, we were at Modex 2 weeks ago. And the amount of AI technology that is hitting the robots and the cobots and stuff like that in that space to where human interaction is really removed.
Now, Modex, that's the one of the world's largest supply chain conferences in Atlanta every year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's move from artificial intelligence to what they call big data.
Okay.
And analytics. And, we've had folks on this show before talking about analytics, maybe in the form of predictive analytics. But, what we're getting to is that there is technology now that will allow you to take huge sets of data and parse it into something that can actually be handled, right? And using that data to make predictions about what might happen or what you might need to increase efficiencies. Tell me how it's being used in supply chain.
There is so much data coming at us on a daily basis. Just on the drive here, mentioned coming in from Charlotte, using ways to get down here and the number of points that it wanted me to add data just so it could change its routing relative to anyone who may be coming behind me. But whether it's point of sale data or even weather patterns, being able to use that and understand how the consumer may purchase, what they need to have on hand as far as inventory, and then even as far back as, talking about those raw materials in order to produce more. There's a lot of that. There's also a lot of visibility relative to the movement of goods. So something that supply chain lacked for a long time. You would put an order in, you would know that it had gotten loaded, but you didn't know where your truck was, when we were going to receive it, whether it was going to be in time. So there's a lot there. But I'll even go as far as to say just recently, the telematics that we have on forklifts, much like the telematics that are on your car, there are so many data points coming to us right now. And so some of our guys have actually written code that can take the failure points that are happening and being processed in the background to be able to look and say, this is indicative of a failure that may be coming with that truck so that we can dispatch a technician to get out there and make the repair, hopefully keeping that customer from having a breakdown that may slow their supply chain.
You know, all of this stuff, and we talked about how this began kind of in the wake of COVID. I mean, it didn't begin in terms of improving efficiencies, but it certainly took off. How much of this this effort to improve efficiency and all the things you're talking about resulted because of COVID? I mean, it just seems like, if COVID hadn't hit, we might have continued to kind of do this.
I think we absolutely would have.
Yeah.
And, you said it earlier in the show, a lot of our customers are figuring out ways to shore up their supply chain. They want to have the data and understanding of where things are, how they integrate, and all of that. And the more data that they have, the better their decision making gets, not only in the products that they may be building, but also in the way that they're serving their consumer.
Yeah, all the things I'm hearing you talk about, this technology is not only increasing efficiency for the supplier, but it's increasing efficiency, of course, for the customer.
It is.
Right? Let's talk about reverse logistics. When we were talking before we came on the show, in the last several days about, what we were going to discuss and just kind of batting things around, you talked about reverse logistics, and at first I didn't quite get it, but I just knew it by a different terminology. But this subject fascinates me. So explain reverse logistics to the viewers, and then let's dive in.
Okay. So, again, something that I think post-COVID and really relative to the e-com explosion, but reverse logistics is simply stated, I mean, it's the consumer having to return the product back to the manufacturer and them getting, or the retailer, and them getting it back into the correct location.
Right. And I also told you before we came on that, I don't remember exactly when, but at some point I had a representative from Amazon on the show, and we were talking about this. And they were sharing how the warehouse for their returns is not as big, but surprisingly close to as big as their warehouse for the product that's going out, which means that reverse logistics is just huge.
It is. And, I'll tell my wife a little bit, right? I mean, if we're going to a party or something and she's looking for a shirt, she may buy it a couple different colors, couple different styles, and she's only going to wear one there.
That's right.
But there's going to be 7 or 8 that are returned. And the likes of Amazon or whoever may be in this e-commerce type business, they're having to deal with those returns coming back. And unfortunately, the consumer doesn't take the time to always put the medium back in the medium box or the small in small box. Right. And so they're faced with the challenge of getting all of these different products back, colors, sizes, and sort. And they've got to figure out how to get it back into their inventory so that they can sell it again.
You said you're going to tell on your wife. Well, I'm going to tell on mine. Several months ago, my wife had a business trip to New York, and she did exactly what you just said. She went online, and she bought several pieces of clothing, and knowing that if she bought 10, she was going to wear 3, and she just, whatever. So she did that. I'm sorry, honey. But but she sent them back. But like I was telling you before, there was something that she bought, and I don't remember right now what it was, but it was a somewhat cheap item. And she called to ask about returning. They said, just don't return it. Just keep it. Because they understood that returning that item was going to cost them more than giving it away, which is what wound up happening.
Yeah. So many, I'll tell you, that happens far more often than probably what we know, because you're right. I mean, between the labor, making sure it gets back in the right place, because if it gets back in the wrong place, now I potentially misship it to someone else and I have another return that I have to handle. But I think the big thing for a lot of our customers is getting it right the first time. Yeah. Because if I get it right the first time when I ship it, I don't have to worry about that return. And so we're actually seeing a lot of technology that is based around the people that are picking orders and shipping these products, whether it's voice-based technology or RF scanning or something. But really trying to ensure that they have 100% accuracy whenever they're shipping products to their end user.
Yeah, let's keep going down that road for a sec. You talk about your customers. Give me an idea, because I just kind of want to follow it through. Give me an idea of the types of customers we're talking
Oh
about.
gosh, so there's 8,000 of them. I'll say that.
Right. Just pick out a couple.
But I mean, we're in a little bit of everything. So I mean, we've got auto manufacturing, a lot of the tier one suppliers that support them, a lot of distribution centers, so
Right.
retailers, pharma, a lot of food processing
Okay.
that we're involved in.
All right. Let's talk about a retail outlet. What is the type of thing that you might do when you went in there to help them? I'm assuming we're talking about organization ability that increases efficiency, but tell me what that looks like.
So, we've got a tagline that we need to optimize before we automate. A lot of our customers, not saying that their processes are bad or archaic in any fashion, but there's always an opportunity to remove waste in processes. And a lot of times when you work in the same space each and every day, there's things that you could change that you just become numb to.
Right.
And so we typically would start with whether it's a lean assessment or some type of an assessment to look at their processes and really help them understand how lean management could help them remove. And then once we've done that, we typically look to automate. Most of the things that we're looking to automate are, really in an effort to reduce travel. So if we see people that are walking across facilities or traveling across facilities all day long, that may be an opportunity for us to introduce some level of automation that would eliminate them having to do that function. I mentioned earlier, implementing processes or technologies around certain ways that they move product. So whether that's an automated forklift or adding conveyor or what have you.
Sometimes, and I'm guessing here, but I would guess that sometimes people bring you in, you have consultation, you don't know how much money that might be able to be saved because of the efficiencies that you are going to implement, but you know it's there. But there's not a way to really put a finger on that kind of thing, right? Or do you have some feel? How does that work?
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
There are some opportunities where we can go in and look at how labor is being utilized, and we can look at what part of that labor would be removed and then exponentially give them what the return would be if we change their process or something like that. But you're very much correct. I mean, when we walk in, we know that there is typically some low-hanging fruit that we can help them with. There are absolutely some customers out there that have teams of people that are on staff, engineers and things like that are constantly looking for these improvement opportunities. That when we were brought in on those, they typically know what they want to do. But for the lion's share of our customers, we know there's opportunity.
What about auto manufacturers? You say you work within that group of folks, and of course, auto manufacturing is huge in the state of South Carolina, whether it be BMW or Volvo or Daimler or whatever have you. What are the types of things how you help that group of folks?
There's a particular T1 or Tier 1 auto supplier here just down the road. And just a few years ago, we went in and they had several people that were dedicated to driving a tugger inside the facility, pulling carts to deliver parts to the line. And we were able to go in and automate the route that person was driving. We also gave them carts that when the automated tugger would pull up to that station, it would send a signal to the cart that would then release, we call it a daughter cart, that would release that cart and it would basically flow to the line. So almost 100% automated other than the return of the empty cart back to that tugger train. But just in that scenario, we were able to save them hundreds of thousands of dollars.
It's amazing to me. Part of my it happens so much in my job doing what I do that I'm constantly talking to people about technology and all kinds of different industries, and it never ceases to blow me away about what we can accomplish these days with the help of technology. And with that being said, I'll get you out of here on this. What's the next big technology? And I'm going to stick with the supply chain industry. Give me an idea of a technology or two, maybe things we already know about, but maybe is getting ready to take off within the next few years.
Yeah, so I'll tell you this,
Yeah.
and I don't want to date myself, but I mean, if you think back to the Jetsons, right? I mean, the Jetsons had Rosie
love the
running
Jetsons.
around the apartment, right?
Astro.
And so technology has been around for decades. And I think the way that the supply chain is embracing it all goes back to shoring up, making sure we don't have another COVID event. So I would almost tell you, I wish I had that crystal ball to tell you what was coming next, but maybe we need to just go back and watch another movie because it's been out there. When we were at Modex, there were thousands of innovative ideas that we saw, and our team walked around in awe. And I even told folks, if it wasn't moving, it was dying. So these manufacturers of these technologies that are coming out, I mean, it was quite impressive. We saw drones that were flying around counting inventory. I think that is really going to hit the ground and get some folks interested in it, because it saves that person from having to go out and count. These drones were counting in seconds. But realistically, I think the next technology that's going to hit the market is what continues to pull all the pieces of the supply chain together. So whether that is helping with speed to market, we saw some AI technology that will leverage lithium and solar to reduce the draw from the grid as far as energy. And we know that that is something that is real and is coming. We're even investigating how we can help our customers with that. But I mean, there's so much out there and so much coming. It's going to be something that just further pulls the supply chain together.
I don't even know what to say. Technology never ceases to amaze me, but I'm glad there's someone, Joe, like you, that understands it better than I do. Joe, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Enjoyed it. Joe Perkins, he is the Executive Vice President for Operations at Carolina Handling. Folks, that concludes another episode of Let's Talk Business South Carolina. I'm so glad you joined us. As always, coming to you from Drum Creative Studio. See you next time.